Welcome to Club Soda's Mindful Drinking Festival. We're online, global, and as always, absolutely free. Hi, I'm Drew, and I'm one of the co-founders of Club Soda.
And I'm Laura, the other co-founder of Club Soda. We help you change your drinking in ways that help you live well. So whether you're looking to cut down, stop for a bit, or quit, you can find what you need from podcasts and books and courses on joinclubsoda.com. This festival, we've brought you an amazing lineup from over 100 people from across the world.
And our programme this time really is global.
Every day starts down under with me, Sarah. As well as organising the festival in Australia, I spend my time looking for alcohol-free alternatives and tips for people who choose not to drink, but who still want to live a social, fun and adventurous life.
And I'll be wrapping up each day here in the States. I'm Amanda, your US festival host and coordinator, and I'm also a mindset coach who helps women change their relationship with alcohol so that they can start living their most authentic life.
Each day with a rolling programme of inspirational panels, conversations, social events, and opportunities to discover new low and low alcohol drinks.
So whether you want inspiration to change your drinking,
Or to connect with other people,
or you want to discover and enjoy a new low and no alcohol drink,
The Mindful Drinking Festival is for you.
cheers!
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 cheers.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning if you're over in the States, and welcome. My name's Drew. I'm one of the co-founders of Club Soda. I want to welcome you to this. I can't believe we're almost at the end, but this is one of the final sessions of the Mindful Drinking Festival, and we are diving into the subject of moderation, cutting down, taking a break, however it is, basically resetting a relationship with alcohol so that it's healthy and adds value to your life. We're going to be live for the next 45 minutes. We would really value your comments, your feedback, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Feel free to share your thoughts. I have an expert panel to talk you through. So I'm really hoping that we can really dive into the detail of moderation, how it works in practice, and really kind of set you up to change your drinking in a way that works for you. So that's enough by way of introduction. I wanted to hand over to our guests to hear a little bit about you, what brings you here. Tell us about you and your drinking. And could we start with you, Chase?
Well, first of all, hey everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. So my name is Chase. I'm from San Francisco, California. I would kind of characterize myself as kind of a typical drinker from high school up through college. Was pretty calm in high school, and then things obviously escalated in university. Became a pretty experienced binge drinker at that point. And at some point during the last couple of years in my mid-20s, I have found that it's become completely unsustainable. So as I kind of transitioned into the professional world, finding that it was really kind of ruining my life. Even just drinking on the weekends, I wouldn't get back my energy and kind of my good mood until late into the next week. And I found that I was spending all of my time hungover or nursing a hangover. It was affecting my life professionally. It was impacting my relationships, and it was generally just making me kind of miserable. So I realized at some point, throughout the process in my entire drinking history, I knew that I needed to make a change. But 9 months ago, I decided to make some actual changes, and for the last 9 months have made a lot of growth, and I'm very grateful for all of these experiences now.
Mm-hmm. So what does your drinking look like now, Chase? How would you describe it?
So now I drink very infrequently. I only drink in like social occasions. Mm-hmm. I would say, if to quantify it, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. But I'm finding that my drinking is steadily trending down. Situations where, even 4 or 5 months ago, I would probably have a drink or two. Now I'm not having the urges. I'm not having the necessity to do that. So I'm consistently trending down. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Okay, cool. And Caitlin, how about you? Tell us about you and what brings you here and you and your drinking.
Such a fun question.
Yeah, sorry. It's really confronting.
It's like for me, it's Sunday morning too. So I'm like, so I'm Canadian. My name is Caitlin, and I'm on the bottom of the screen. I'm redefining sobriety. I didn't put it in the next to my name, but so I am a Canadian. I live in Mexico. I've been living here for 8 years. And I started drinking quite young in my teens, and I would say right from the beginning it was pretty problematic. Definitely binge drinking a lot, and then it turned into also drinking and using a lot of drugs, which carried through most of my 20s. But it's interesting because even though there was brief times where I tried periods of sobriety, I still think I focused more on the harms that I thought were associated with the drugs and not so much with the alcohol. And then I was living in Cambodia at the end of my 20s, and that's where I'd say I kind of came the closest to what I would call a bottom, although I didn't really see it that way at the time. But I was in a really stressful job situation. I was also part of the expat community, which was very much a drink hard, play hard. Everything was available there, and using a lot of different drugs, including illicit and also pharmaceutical. And I was really unhappy and really unhealthy. And I was also drinking every day at the time. Like that was when I was drinking the most. So drinking every day, kind of to unwind and go to sleep, partying a lot on the weekends. And actually that's when I moved to Mexico, and I knew a lot of things had to change, and I stopped a lot of the drugs on my way here and threw stuff in the toilet and got here. But the alcohol piece was a lot harder for me in a way, and it hung on for a while, and I wasn't daily drinking anymore, but I would go out and just have these nights that would just get away from me. And it was really frustrating. It actually got really hard for me for a while because I was like, I'm so accomplished in other ways of my life. I can figure other things out, but why is this so hard? Why is it so difficult to heal this part of me? And I didn't feel like I was somebody who needed to be abstinent forever. But I started questioning that, and just like I didn't feel like I had a dependency on alcohol, but yet there was this sort of piece that just was really difficult for me. And eventually I just got to a point where I woke up one morning, and it was again one of those nights where it started innocently enough. I had gone out for dinner with some friends, thought it was just going to be this casual night, ended up in a stairwell doing coke, like not the night that I had wanted, and woke up just feeling like it wasn't the worst night, but I was just like, felt like shit. And I was really disappointed with myself. And that I think was the biggest piece for me, was I was just like, I felt like I was constantly letting myself down. And so in that moment, then I decided, like, I think something finally clicked. And I was actually studying to be a health coach at the time, which also led to this sort of like disconnect, like dissonance in my life,
I know what that's like.
Yeah. And so, I really started applying a lot of what I was learning. And, that was the beginning of my journey, really about 6 years ago. And since then, I wrote a book called Drink Less, Be More, How to Have a Great Night in Life Without Getting Wasted. I coach people online, and I also host retreats now. And my program has kind of evolved to be called Redefining Sobriety, because I actually worked in harm reduction for a lot of years. And I really do believe that for the most part, we can define our own relationship to a lot of different substances, and including alcohol. And at the time, 6 years ago, there still wasn't a lot of that. Now there's it's amazing. There's so many options for people. And I love that there's pretty much different flavors for every person. But at the time when I was seeking support, there really wasn't. It was a very abstinence only focus. And I didn't really feel like I fit into that at the time.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Caitlin. And Sam, finally, tell us about you, what brings you here, and about you and alcohol.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I would say that, maybe a little different from Chase and Caitlin, moderation is not necessarily something that I've really thought about a lot for myself. I've always been a light drinker. I've never, in college, there were times where I would drink too much, but it was never a huge part of my life. But I opened an alcohol-free bar, Getaway, last year. And so I've just, first of all, I've had a lot of interactions with people who are moderating or trying to moderate or interested in moderation or struggling with moderation. And I also, I think through my interactions with these people and with starting the bar and with, family member who is sober. I've reconsidered a lot of my own drinking habits, even though I was never a heavy drinker. It's definitely caused me to be much more focused on my habits and what am I doing because it's a habit? What am I doing because, because I'm bored, rather than, do I really want to have a drink, or am I having a drink because it's just part of the routine? So, I think I have I'm kind of on a different side of this, but definitely something I've thought a lot about. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, isn't that interesting that so we are following a session with Annie Grace, which is going to speak really strongly to people who decide that going alcohol free is going to be the best way forward for them, and that we have this very strong story in our society, don't we, about alcohol consumption that gets completely out of hand, people hitting rock bottom, and then deciding that being alcohol free or sober forever is the only way forward. But it was really interesting. We all seem to be coming at this story from a slightly different angle, which is about the role that alcohol plays in your life and the extent to which it makes you happy. In different kinds of ways. And I wonder, do you have any, for people who are watching this, who are maybe right at the beginning of thinking about their relationship with alcohol, do you have any kind of thoughts on the kind of people for whom moderation is maybe going to work as a strategy, and people who should definitely just kind of not even try and just go sober? Do you get what I mean? Do you have any thoughts on that for people who are right at the beginning of thinking about this?
Is that question for me, or are you opening it up?
I was throwing it out to anyone, but
okay.
Sam, you're speaking, so go ahead.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, I guess I walked into that. Well, no, I was just going to say that, I think, especially in the role that I have of serving customers, serving guests who are coming in to Getaway, we try very hard not to kind of interrogate people on their drinking habits, or even make them feel like they have to talk about it if they don't want to. That said, a lot of people do come in and share their stories with us. And I would say a large portion of our audience, of our guests are already non-drinkers, either in AA or other programs, but consciously, seriously, not drinking. Mm-hmm. And then we have a lot of people who are more casually, sober curious, as they say. But anyway, what's been really interesting to me is the people who come in because they're locals and they just saw our spot, or they saw it on Yelp or something, and they said, hey, I want to check that out. They drink, they come in, they find that they can actually have fun without alcohol, and then they later tell us that it was actually a big part of them cutting back on their alcohol or realizing they had a problem. And it doesn't happen a ton, but there's been a couple cases where that's happened, and it's been really exciting to know that by giving them the option, and I think that's a big part of it, is sometimes people think the only option is to drink. It's such a part of the culture. By realizing that actually there are options, there are ways to have fun, ways to socialize that don't involve drinking. I think that kind of opens up some doors in a lot of people's minds to saying, oh, I could do this. I could try this.
Yeah. And so, Caitlin, you do a lot of work with individuals who are thinking about changing drinking. Do you have any kind of guidelines in your own head about the kind of styles of change that are going to work for certain types of people? What do you say to that? People who are right.
Sure. And it's actually really important to me because there are certain people that I can't support with my approach. And it's very important for me that we're a good fit for working together. And so there are a percentage of the population who are people for whom moderation isn't recommended and would always be a struggle, maybe. And so some of those people are in my family. So I also am very close to that. Like I know the difference between, how our brain functioning works, and that it's, you might try to moderate, but it's every sip of that alcohol, the sip of alcohol is, and that's where the AA saying, one might as well be 100 or 1,000 or whatever it is, because it triggers that response in your brain. And it's something more powerful than your willpower, your, whatever your training is. But that's actually a very small percentage of the population. Mm-hmm. So one of the questions I always ask people when they come to me first is, well, have you tried taking a break? And I also want to say that I think that people seek out an approach that allows for moderation because intuitively they know that it could work for them. And I think people who it's very rare in the 6 years now, or like 5.5 that I've been really focusing on this online, it's very, 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 very rare that I speak to someone who actually isn't a good fit, because I think our intuition is actually really on point a lot of the time in terms of what kind of treatment we need and whether or not an approach like this is actually going to work. But one of the first questions I ask people is, have you tried taking a break from alcohol before? How did that go for you? What did you try differently? And a lot of times I think what happens and why people get defeated is because they just try cutting out on alcohol, but they don't try anything else. And I know Chase can probably speak to this as well, that like moderation isn't easy and it's not a cop-out, that there's still a lot of retraining that needs to happen, and it's a big commitment. And I think sometimes people miss that piece, and think, oh, I'll just cut alcohol out of the picture. I'm going to do a 30-day challenge, or I'm going to do whatever. But if nothing changes, nothing changes. And all you're doing is taking alcohol out, and you haven't actually done the behavioral change work, the healing from the inside out, actually changing your brain. And so if people have tried taking a break and they were able to, but they find at some point, not that they go back to drinking every day, but they go back to, again, that cycle of kind of self-disappointment, of letting themselves down, of not showing up as their best self. They find that certain social situations are more challenging than others. It gets usually really more nuanced. And that's when I'm like, great, we can work together, because it's probably that you just haven't had the right kind of support, and you haven't done the inner work within a safe container to actually change some of these deeply ingrained patterns and habits, and like neural responses. But I know that if you've been able to moderate in certain circumstances, you actually can moderate in any. It's not like it's not like you're, I can moderate over here, but not over here. You just haven't learned how to do it in that other situation yet. Yeah. So that's kind of it's a more detailed and obviously a longer conversation than that, but that's generally how my first interactions with people go when we're deciding if we're a good fit for each other, and also for moderation.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase, and you run a podcast, Stone Cold Moderation, and you've been out speaking to all sorts of experts about how to change your drinking in different ways. What have you gathered from that? Are there any kind of pearls of wisdom or your own kind of experience about whether moderation might work for somebody or not?
Yeah, and I just wanted to piggyback on what Caitlin is talking about. I really like that idea of kind of trusting your intuition. That's a really eloquent way of putting it. I mean, just first, my own experience, like I was somebody who was only drinking on the weekends, was not drinking like at night. I was not somebody who liked to drink by myself. So just kind of auditing myself and my kind of emotional makeup. I was like, I think I could cut down drastically, but not have the need to abstain for my entire life, right? So if, in the future I'm at a nice restaurant, I want to have a glass of wine, or I'm on the beach, I want to have a beer, I can treat myself to that. So I really like that idea of trusting intuition. I mean, I have been lucky enough to have some really good experts on my show, including Laura Willoughby of Club Soda. And I mean, I really like the idea of kind of in a nutshell. I think all of them have kind of touched around that, like trusting your intuition. If you're somebody who thinks that you can get it done and you want to give it a shot, it's definitely worth going for. I'm somebody in my own life, I think I can. So I'm kind of on that journey. So we'll see. Hopefully I can. Yeah.
I mean, for myself, so I didn't talk about myself and my own drinking at all at the beginning. So apologies for that, for exposing you and then not myself. So for myself, I've got to moderation with a really, really slow process, which actually has been caught up a lot with how I've changed as a person generally, and the kinds of ways that I would have previously kind of pretty unthinkingly included alcohol in my life, and then finding different strategies and changing over time. And I was talking to somebody earlier, it's like that my change is like a slow moving Wes Anderson film compared to, the kind of the jump cut of a Quentin Tarantino kind of movie, So it has been like gradual over time. And it has been a lot about learning what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And I think that's a really important thing. One of the challenges that I think that many people burden themselves with unnecessarily when it comes to moderation is the idea that you have to get it right from day one. That if you are trying moderation and then you do go off the rails, you end up with a stinking hangover, that somehow moderation as a strategy has failed, and that therefore you need to be alcohol free. And I wondered, like, for those kind of practical kind of tactics, I wondered whether you had any kind of practical advice about strategies that people can use to get going if they're thinking about moderation, ways in which to actually make it work in practice. Caitlin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So what I often talk about with my clients is that we have to approach this with essentially what you're saying, with curious compassion, and really it's doing research, because I can't tell you exactly what's going to work for you. And even, look at this call, the four of us on this panel, we all have really different experiences. And so it is a process of investigation and self-inquiry, and you have to kind of be in for it, and want to do that. And but also I think that it does, just because you're not choosing abstinence, which kind of gives you this really clearly defined container to be in, right? It's like, especially even if it's just a 30-day challenge, like no alcohol, 30 days, those are the rules, I'm going to follow them. It's like a box that you put yourself into, and you have to figure out how to make it work if you're going to follow through. I think sometimes also with moderation, it's like, well, what are the rules, and how do I make decisions for myself when I'm trying this out? And I actually do feel like that container is really important. It just might look a little bit different. So what I do, for example, is I support my clients in the beginning. It becomes less necessary as we move along, but in the beginning to come up with their own alcohol agreement with themselves. And it starts, usually I recommend minimum 30 days, but 2 months is preferable, especially because I work with a lot of people who aren't drinking on a daily basis. So you want to kind of have the time to have the different kinds of social situations, or the life stressors or triggers or whatever comes up. But it actually really creates that container of, okay, so, what is my weekday going to look like? What is my weekend going to look like? How many drinks max? What is my sort of point of no return? How do I if I know that I don't want to get drunk, or I know that I don't want to let myself down by not following through on my intentions, well then, how do I stay on the sober side of that point of no return? And so it actually is quite detailed, and it's an agreement that they come up with themselves and sign it with themselves. And it's basically, I'm a witness and a guide and a support around then the strategies to follow through. But it does give a structure, because sometimes we really need that structure, and we need to know that, oh, I made this commitment to myself to only drink 1 weekday a week and 1 day on the weekend. Okay, so now what do I need to do? What's the inner work? What are my strategies? What alternatives do I need to have in my fridge? What are all the things I need to have in place in order to be able to follow through on that agreement that I have with myself? And I think that's sometimes where the complete break, helps put us we need to follow through in certain circumstances. Whereas if we don't have that structure or those guidelines in the beginning when we're practicing moderation, sometimes it's really easy just to slide back into autopilot or what's habitual. So that's something that I find is really, really helpful in the beginning. Again, over time, it doesn't become as necessary. And it's also a living document. I always say, I'm like, you're the one who gets to decide. And we meet every 2 weeks. So we might sign this agreement for 2 months. But if you see after 2 weeks that it's really not working for you, or there's some really sticky points or areas that are really, you're facing a lot of resistance, great, good information. Let's not be judgmental towards ourselves about it. Let's just adjust course maybe, or see what other kinds of support you need, what other alternatives and all of that, so, and then we can keep reassessing as we go along. And then eventually it doesn't become as necessary anymore because you've changed.
Talking of structure, Chase, I know that you've spoken in the past about drinking commandments, I think you call them. And I wondered what your approach is now, whether that's evolved for you, or whether you have rules or I quite like Caitlin's kind of description of structure rather than rules, but how does that work for you practically?
Yeah, so I'm a teacher, so I do like rules, and I do like very like clear and kind of strict guidelines for myself and for others. So for me, I kind of experimented with that a bit. And what I have now is I basically call it the rule of 3. And if I choose to drink in a certain occasion, I'm not going to have more than 3 drinks in that occasion, in that day, in that 24-hour period. So this has worked well for me because, again, I'm not somebody who has ever had problems with like drinking every day, drinking by myself when I go home. That's not something I ever really did. So this has worked for me. And yeah, I mean, I really like that structure. I would recommend for people who are like interested in kind of experimenting with the same thing to not have, maybe just have like 1 or 2 rules, you can call them, or you can call them guidelines, whatever you like. Not having more than 3, because I have kind of come across people who are trying moderation and they have like a list of like 10 rules, like, and it's crazy. It just leaves way too much room for, interpretation, way too much gray area. They get confused, and it can be kind of lead them down a path where they end up, getting drunk. So for me, the simplicity of just having like one rule that I put in place has been really helpful for me, just in my own mind, how I function. And I think the important thing is that it hasn't been a lot of work. It's been really easy for me to do that, just follow my rule. And if I do kind of end up, I don't know, kind of breaking it, maybe going a little bit over, having maybe one too many, or having like a drink that was a little too big, it's important for me to not punish myself for that, to not give myself a consequence. Before, I was like, okay, if I break my rule, I got to go home immediately and I got to go to bed, because you're in timeout, you're in punishment, you're done. And I found that was not very productive, because that's kind of, putting unnecessary shame into the experience, right? And that's kind of what we want to avoid. So that's worked for me. It's very clear.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, right? It's okay to get it wrong as you're trying this and seeing what works for you. So I know for myself, my approach to moderation started really kind of seriously when I made a big category switch. I was just like, all my beer drinking is going to be alcohol-free, or as close to alcohol-free as I can get. And that dramatically reduced my alcohol consumption by more than like 3/4, when I looked at everything else I was drinking. Sam, is that, that idea of a kind of category switch, or using alcohol-free drinks? You run a bar which specializes in this. What kind of role do you think that has as a moderation strategy for people?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And this is, I'm going to come back to that, but just a note on the alcohol-free beer and alcohol-free wine, stuff like that kind of mimics alcoholic drinks, as opposed to some of the things we serve, which are more fruit-based or soda-based. We often have customers who come in, they tell us they're sober. They ask us, they ask me if like, almost like, is it okay that I have a non-alcoholic beer? And I tell them, I mean, it depends. If you haven't had a drink in years and you're worried this may, trigger some kind of craving for the drink, I would recommend not having it. It's ultimately up to you. But I think for people who are trying to moderate, I mean, even for myself, I love the non-alcoholic beers that are coming out now. I've never had an O'Doul's in my life, because again, I was not a drinker who stopped drinking. But no, not to bash O'Doul's, maybe it's delicious, I've never had it, but that was always that was always people's idea of what, at least in America, of what a non-alcoholic beer was. And I've just never, it always seemed to me like more of a chore to say, I'm going to replace my beer with an O'Doul's. It wasn't a fun thing to look forward to necessarily.
Blue is our equivalent in the UK. Yeah.
Beck's Blue, right. Yeah, exactly. And now there's so many cool craft breweries doing existing craft breweries doing non-alcoholic, new craft breweries that only do non-alcoholic. And there's such a range of flavors and styles. And people always ask me, does it taste like beer? It does taste like beer. I mean, if you're trying to moderate, so it's okay to have those flavors still. You're not worried that it's gonna send you on a binge or something. I would say, like, yeah, that's super helpful. Even for me, I'll steal some of those drinks from our bar and bring them home with me. And like lately, I've been trying the McKellar beers. They're awesome. I mean, I would, I'll drink those and then not be craving a beer afterwards. And actually, that's one of the tips I wanted to mention that I've heard. I would attribute it to somebody, but I forget who I heard it from. So I'm sorry if this was you. But this idea that your first drink of the night be a non-alcoholic drink, and it's something more interesting than water or seltzer or diet soda or whatever. But a non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic spirit, or just a mocktail, to start with that and say, okay, do I still want to drink, or was I just trying to socialize? Because for me, again, 9 times out of 10, if I have a non-alcoholic beer, I don't then go to an alcoholic beer afterwards. I kind of say, okay, I had the thing in my hand. I got to drink something. I'm kind of full on the calories. Like, I'm good, So yeah, just in terms of like practical tips, I think that's a really good one. If you're just starting to try to moderate, just start with a non-alcoholic drink, and then don't beat yourself up if you have, if whatever happens after that. But I think it's just a good way to kind of ease your way in.
Yeah, absolutely. Or 2 non-alcoholic drinks, and then if
that's the thing.
Yeah,
I think it can snowball just like alcohol can, right? You could have a non-alcoholic drink and say, that was delicious, I want to try another.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, of course.
So I love that you brought that up, Sam. And I was actually thinking about really practical things to say on this panel as well. And that was going to be one of mine, that I think it also creates a pattern interrupt of just, we sometimes go onto autopilot and we're so used to going and you're waiting for your table, for example, and do you want to be by the bar? Do you want to order a cocktail before your dinner? Whatever it is, or we just automatically order the alcohol that we're used to drinking. And now it's so amazing too that there are so many non-alcoholic options. You can actually have something that you really enjoy. And I like that you said not just water, like treat yourself to something that tastes good, that you're going to enjoy. And actually, that's also what I often recommend then for the second. So do that first and just try that as a new rule, the one rule. Maybe I'm going to order something non-alcoholic when I go out. And then with your second drink, if you do decide to order something with alcohol, also order another thing that's really yummy. Because you're not going to want to let it waste. You're not going to want to let, a glass of water is easy just to let sit on the table. But if you order another, like a second, I often do that. I also am trending downwards, like Chase said. I don't drink very much anymore. And it wasn't, it's just been easy for me to not want to. But I often find that if I am going to drink, I'll also order something that's really delicious and non-alcoholic, and it just slows down how quickly I'm drinking my glass of wine. It feels like a treat, and I think we need to make this feel good, and that's why I'm also so grateful for places like the Getaway Bar and all of the non-alcoholic options right now, because we don't feel like we're in deprivation, and humans, like, we don't like punishment. We don't like to feel like we're suffering or missing out on something, and the more it feels like we are, the less likely we're going to stick to our intentions. And so the more this can feel positive and pleasurable and delicious and, whatever you're seeking from the experience, it has to feel good or you're not going to want to keep doing it. So treat yourself, drink the yummy things.
Yeah, Drew, is it okay? I know we're going to wait for a little long. Okay, so really quick, I just want to piggyback off that. What Caitlin said, it's like, I think it's so important that it be fun and that it not be militaristic. I mean, for some people that may work, that kind of cold turkey, and for some people it might be necessary to have that cold, depending on where you are with your drinking, to have that cold turkey, I'm not doing this anymore. But I think for many, many people who are concerned about their drinking, it's like, it has to be enjoyable, whether that's, whether that's like finding meditation and exercise and all these other things that make you feel good so that you don't crave the alcohol, or whether it's just drinking non-alcoholic drinks that are like super delicious. I think it can't be about depriving yourself, because for so many people that just causes you to kind of go right back to the bad habits.
Yeah. Well, isn't that kind of the point in all of this, is that whether you're choosing an alcohol based drink or an alcohol-free drink, have a drink that you actually enjoy. I was really struck listening to somebody being interviewed on a panel. For anyone who's watching this who wants to look it up, it was Adrian Chiles yesterday afternoon. And he was talking about, he's a journalist. He's got pretty well documented struggles with alcohol. He actually did a whole documentary about it here in the UK. Talks very openly about moderation and his steps towards it. And he was describing, imagining every single drink that he'd ever had stretched out, in his life. And he reckoned it was probably about 4 miles worth of alcohol that he consumed in his life. And then he was thinking, how many of those drinks did I actually enjoy? And if I did nothing else, if I only drank the alcohol that I enjoyed, I would massively reduce the alcohol. And so for me, I'm really interested in how we can use pleasure and happiness as a way of guiding us to better choices, both in alcohol-free drinks and in alcoholic drinks, if you're moderating.
Yeah, and to be making that choice, I like that Sam touched on that as well, from a place of feeling good, so doing all the other things, because I think we're focusing a lot too on what to actually do in the drinking environment. But of course, so much of this happens. Or what do you do in the morning? How do you treat yourself? What's your conversation in your head? You know, what self-care practices do you have? How are you showing up for yourself? And so if you're taking care of yourself in all of these other ways, it's going to be a lot easier to make that decision from a place of self-care and from feeling really good and really aligned and knowing what my best yes is, knowing what my higher self, or whatever you want to call it, you know, how I want to show up, you know, the better me, whatever resonates with you, you know, that it's a choice that that person is making, not the stressed out, irritated, tired, you know, hungry, like all the things, right? We don't make good decisions when we're under stress, haven't slept well, are hungry, right? And then the cycle continues, and then we reach for the drink because it's the easiest thing, you know, and then we feel bad about ourselves, and we don't sleep well, and then we wake up feeling, you know, and it's like the hamster wheel. So getting off the hamster wheel by all of the other ways we're showing up for ourselves then helps make better, more pleasure-informed choices around what we're actually drinking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know for myself that if I look at the times when my drinking was really problematic, it was only really incidentally to do with alcohol. You know, it was mostly about everything else that was going on in my life. And if I'd been really paying attention to those things, I wouldn't have got myself into difficulty. So I want to ask a really practical question. Which is about tolerance for alcohol, and this is personal inquiry on my account, so you can help me out. What I've really noticed as I've moderated and as I've kind of been committed to a moderation journey is that as I'm drinking less, my tolerance for alcohol is going down as well. So I would have said 2 years ago I had a hard 2 pint limit. Any more than 2 pints of alcohol and 2 pints of beer and I was in trouble. I would say I probably now got a 1 pint limit. You know, that the amount of alcohol that I can safely drink and be happy and confident in myself is really trended downwards. Has that been your experience as well over time? I wonder for any of you.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe.
Sorry, Chase, go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I'm somebody who has always kind of been a lightweight, to be honest, which I was in denial about for a very long time, especially in college. But yeah, I've definitely noticed that going without for a long time, and now my tolerance is very low, and which is good because, like we said earlier, I mean, how many of those drinks are actually going to be pleasurable? And for me, the first one is, the second one is, but beyond 3, I've really found now, you know, in the last 9 months that no, like beyond 3 is not pleasurable at all, and it's been interesting to find that like I don't miss the feeling of being drunk. I don't miss the feeling of intoxication, which, you know, 22-year-old me would have been like, well, no, you love being drunk. You love being intoxicated and partying or whatever. But now reflecting on that, like I really don't miss that. And that's been a revelation and super healthy physically and mentally for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say, I think there's this like great irony in the fact that in a heavy drinking culture, like college for a lot of us is, you know, the heaviest drinking culture we'll be in our life. The irony is that there's this, it's like, it's cool to get really fucked up, and it's also cool to have a really high tolerance, which means that you don't get as messed up as quickly. So it's like, what is it? Like, which is it? You know, what's the better thing? And ironically, it's like, I don't know if this is good or bad. I guess overall it's good, but it's like nowadays I have one cocktail and I feel it and I'm drunk, you know, like, I mean, I'm not wasted, but I feel it for sure. Yeah. Which I think is only a good thing. I mean, that's only a good thing because overall I'm spending less money, right, on those drinks. And I'm not putting as many of these, you know, potentially toxic substances into my body. And I'm still getting those pleasurable effects from alcohol, you know, with that one drink. So, you know, I think that definitely my tolerance has gone down. And I think that is a point of pride, you know, as opposed to an embarrassment.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we just need to make lightweight and proud T-shirts to wear.
I would wear it. You know, I was actually just having this conversation yesterday with some friends of mine who've been making kombucha and using me, like I love, you know, they're brewing and ginger beer and stuff like that. So I keep getting these samples, but they decided to make a kind of a fermented wine thing. I don't really know. They used yeast and I don't know. Anyways, they brought it to me, and then they asked me, and it was really funny because I actually forgot, because they'd been bringing me these unmarked bottles, and I got home one night late, kind of late from the office, and I opened one, and I chugged, it wasn't a big bottle, but I chugged about this much of it, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, I felt the effects so fast. And it was the fermented wine one that they were making, that's kind of like a claricotte, or tastes a bit like that. I mean, it was really good. But then they asked me about it, and they said, well, what did you think? And I was like, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask. It tasted good, but I was like, I'm such a lightweight. And I use those words. And I'm like, I'm such a lightweight now that my tolerance is so low. So it felt really strong to me. Also, I was, coming home from work, and I hadn't had dinner, and it was on an empty stomach. But I said, you might want to test this one out with a few other people who are more, who are looking for more alcoholic beverages. And so that was an experience I had recently with that. And I definitely notice now, for me, one glass of wine feels like a lot of the time. And I had a glass of wine last night, and I didn't feel, because I drank it really slowly, and with dinner, and with a limonada. But this morning, it was interesting. I was going onto this panel, and I have this slightly, I'm just so tuned into it, right? And it's the feeling that I probably lived with so much and didn't even notice was there before. But it's that slightly dull feeling just right here. And I'm like, wow, that happened after this one very long, drawn out glass of wine. The other thing, just speaking from a female perspective, and this is something I've heard from a lot of my clients too, is that culture that you all speak of kind of being proud of how much you can drink, is so problematic for women, because we don't learn that we metabolize alcohol differently. We kind of know, but kind of don't really. I'm a small person, and now I think about the amount of alcohol that I drank. No wonder I was borderline alcohol poisoning so often, because I was keeping up with my male colleagues, which we were supposed to do, or my friends. And it was, as much as it's a point of pride for men than for women who can keep up with the guys, and it's so damaging and such an indicator of our also just terrible toxic how toxic masculinity and sort of the patriarchy in our workplaces affect us in so many ways. And I work with women who are lawyers, I work with women who are, in professions where that's still they're expected to go out and drink, finance, all these that's what you do. You go out, you talk with your clients, and you're supposed to drink as much as your male colleagues. And the fact that that still exists is so problematic on so many levels. And, that a lot of women, we just don't know. I think it's starting to be talked about a little bit more now, but I didn't know for a long time that it was almost, I thought it was a deficient, oh, you're trying to tell me that I'm lesser than because I can't drink as much as the guys. And it's no, part of that is basic biology, and it shouldn't be this deficit that I somehow can't drink as much alcohol as my male colleagues or my male friends. And that's been a big one for a lot of the women that I work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And but on behalf of men everywhere, wow, sorry. Patriarchy damages us as well, but seriously, recognizing my complicity in that. So we're coming up to the end of our time. For anyone who's watching this, I just wonder if you guys have any kind of and is seriously thinking about moderation as a way of changing their drinking. Do you have any kind of words of encouragement or advice, or what's the next step that you think somebody should take? Chase.
Yeah, I would definitely. I really like the idea that recovery is linear, and that it should be individualized for each person. For me and my personal journey, I would say, I am it is just a journey. It is just that. So I don't, not as a disclaimer, but I don't pretend to have everything figured out. If I find that my drinking habits, if I revert to my past habits, I might have to consider, an alcohol-free lifestyle. But I like the idea that recovery is linear. So be patient. Don't be too hard on yourself. I believe that any progress forward is positive and should be celebrated. So for people who are out there who are looking to try to make a change, thinking about it, scared to do it, I would definitely give it a shot, and Godspeed.
Awesome. Sam, any final thoughts?
Two really quick things. One, I think it's kind of obvious, but like find a creative hobby. Just in general, I think it's a really, if you can find something to do with your time that is not, coming home and drinking, like it's not gonna feel like a chore to not drink. It's gonna feel like something you look forward to. And then I think also, to Caitlin's point, like if you're surrounded by people at work or your friends who are pressuring you to drink, I mean, I think first of all, you got to consider, whether they have your best interest in mind. And I think also just try to find one person who has successfully moderated and talk to them about it, because I think that kind of mutual support is so important, to have in your social sphere.
Yeah. Caitlin, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing to mention as well is that really this is your choice. And there might be people in your life who are saying that you don't have a problem, you don't need to cut back, and which again, it sounds, as I say it out loud, it sounds like so crazy, like it's really high school, but this exists for adults as well. And really, I feel like it just collectively we're being called into our, we need to show up right now in so many different ways as our best people, our best humans, our most caring, most compassionate, most helpful, most active, selves. And to make decisions that from that place, I think that this is part of our activism too, is to be the best version of ourselves, for our partners, for our families, for our communities, for the world. And so what that looks like is an individual journey. And the beauty, and I mean, I'm so excited for this festival and all the people you brought together, is there are so many options. Like I said, these didn't exist when I started this journey, and it was quite isolating. And if you feel isolated now, I would say that that might be part of the resistance or the fear, because it's hard to take this step, but there are so many people to connect with. There's so many options. There's so many different inspiring people online. There are communities. There is that one person. I'm sure if you look for them, like Sam said, you'll find that person, in real life as well. I think once we make a decision, things align for us to help show us people that we might not have paid attention to or noticed before. But just know that you're supported. We're here. You're supported energetically and in the universe. Like, this is a really good time right now to be making choices for your health and for our, individual health and collective health. And this is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. Guys, Chase, Caitlin, Sam, thank you so much for joining us for this really fascinating conversation. For anyone who is who's interested in finding out more about Caitlin's courses or Chase's podcast, or at some point gets to go to Brooklyn and hang out with Sam in his bar, you would be super welcome. And equally in Club Soda, if we can support you to help and change your drinking in a way that helps you live well, we're here for you. Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.